Town Board, we are live on the channel, on YouTube, and on our live stream.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the May 10th work session of the East Hampton Town Board. Carol, would you please read the roll call?
Councilwoman Burke Gonzalez.
Present.
Councilman Lees.
Present.
Councilwoman Overby.
Here.
Councilwoman Rogers.
Present.
Supervisor Van Scoyac.
Present. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's meeting will begin with a public portion where any member of the public may address the board on any topic. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We don't have anyone here signed up in person. Do we have any callers on the line, Jason? Jason, do we have any
We
callers
currently
on the
don't
line?
have any callers on the line. We currently don't have any callers on the line, and I am calling in with the phone line right now to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. We have a number of topics to discuss today. First, we'll have the new senior center design team and community engagement program, and we have Renette Riley, Carol Ross Barney, and Ryan Gann here with us. We'll also be discussing draft legislation for the Community Housing Fund. Jennifer Nigro will be presenting. And we have the New York State Stretch Code, Samantha Klein, John Jilnicki, and Marine Refueling legislation, John Jilnicki, David Brown, Tim Treadwell, followed by Liaison Reports and resolutions. So we can go ahead and get started with our first topic. If we do get a caller in the next minute or so for public comment, we'll take them in between work session topics. So without any further ado, do we have our outside consulting team on the line?
They are in, and I will make sure that you guys can see all of them.
Sure.
Kathy, you want to give an introduction
Yeah,
since
well-
you're the liaison to the senior center?
Sure. Well, we're excited to welcome R2 Architecture to join us today. If you recall, we went out for RFP for an architect for the new senior center on Abraham's Path. And there were about 15 firms that had responded, and we very methodically went through and interviewed the firms. And we were so excited back last December when we awarded the project to R2. And today we're joined by the two principals, Renette Riley and Carol Ross Barney, and Ryan Gann, who's leading the community engagement. So I'd really like to turn it over to them so they can take us through their presentation and introduce themselves to the community and to the board.
Good morning and welcome.
Hello. So I'm Renette Riley. Our R2 Architecture is a joint venture between two firms. We've been colleagues and joint venture. Well, we've been colleagues for years and joint venture partners since 2015. So this project is this is our project team. Carol will be the lead designer. I'll be the technical lead. Steve Sue, Yumi Morawaki, Ryan Giblin, Misa Inua, and Ryan Gann are part of our lead team. Next. So our R2 Architecture is founded on the principle of creating connections to the community, designing public buildings. We've done design in Suffolk County. We have lots of experience with senior community and daycare centers. The firms have won over 300 design awards, and together we're about 70 staffs. We're 100% women-owned business, and we take the seriousness of budget on projects to be very important to our team throughout the process. Next slide. These are just some images of projects that we've collectively or individually worked on. Next one. So retail, community centers, public parks, individual projects, central civic spaces.
Oh, I'm jumping around. Sorry, Ronette.
Sorry.
I'm just really a bad Zoom driver, I guess. What can I say?
That's why I gave it to you to do. No,
Okay, well, thank you.
no. But most importantly, it's places to gather, and some of the projects that we both have worked on are river walks and promenades, esplanades, parks and plazas, courtyards, recreational facilities, libraries, retail stores, hospitality, conference centers, restaurants and cafes, playgrounds and zoos. And we think a lot of that experience plays into it. And I'd like to turn it over to Carol now.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so pleased to be here, and I'm really excited about this project. We all are. Like Ronette said, our past experience is almost all in the public realm. And quite honestly, those are the types of projects we like to do. I don't think that I'm particularly not interested unless I can make a difference in a community, a good difference. And so our work does include senior centers and community spaces. You see a little list of them here. I'm not going to read it to you, but I do have to tell you that our senior centers are some of the most exciting ones we do. In fact, when we were interviewing for the job, what this project reminds me of, the goals are a project we did in Evanston, Illinois. A little same type of town to a certain extent, very diverse, both in age and income and race, and also had a senior center that wasn't heavily used, that needed to be tied into the community. And that community center today is putting on an addition, and it has attendees from all ages and all races. In fact, right now the seniors that are fighting off a takeover attempt by the Children's Theater. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, I think that's a type of contribution we want to make by design to your community. So one of the things that we're really excited about, and it's just about to start, we think that design happens when designers listen to people. And so we've been fortunate to we're working with your staff and your leadership. We've been fortunate to propose and have accepted the idea of a community engagement. The idea of community engagement is to make participation easy and equitable. And the benefits are a build of trust. Buildings are far more successful when people feel that they've been heard and they trust in the result. And so what we've tried to do, in fact, we try to do this for every project we are lucky enough to design, is we've tried to design a process that will enable both current and future users to be heard. And then we'll be able to hear also about East Hampton, which is really critical for a designer to understand the community's values and aspirations. Like I said, we've done this before. This is a picture of a recent one that we did in Rogers, Arkansas. And this was really a good community engagement. One reason is I learned how to play pickleball during this community engagement. And, but it gives you the flavor that we want. We want people to be comfortable. If we have 100 people, that's fine. If we have 10, that's fine. It's to be comfortable and hear what the community thinks and needs about the project we're about to undertake. This is another slide example from that particular project. We also have planned not just to listen to people in person, but also to listen to them via a survey, both paper and digital. And I'm going to turn this over now to my associate, Ryan Gann. Ryan has been the leader of engagement in our studio. And we take it very seriously. And he's designed a process for East Hampton that'll begin next week. And he's going to take you through it really briefly. Ryan?
Thanks so much, Carol and Ronette, for that tee up. So we've had a lot of fun working so far with Councilperson Kathy Burke-Gonzalez and the Director of the Department of Human Services, Diane Patricio, on designing this community outreach strategy. And as Carol sort of talked about, our preferred process is to look, listen, and learn first. Then we get to speak and revise and go through the design process. And for any community outreach effort that we undertake, we look to craft a process that's unique for its context. So what works in Chicago or Rogers, Arkansas might not work as well in East Hampton. And we take that really seriously in crafting a unique approach that uses both data and insight that we're looking to retrieve. And at its essence, community engagement looks to both validate and investigate our collective assumptions, that we ensure that all stakeholders, that includes the town, that includes the Department of Health and Human Services, that includes this board, that includes our users, both current and future, and the community broadly. As Carol mentioned, making sure that everyone is excited about this future opportunity and feels some sense of ownership. So we've designed a strategy that leverages both passive and active participation. And the way we communicate, the way that I communicate is different. The way that each of us communicate is different. And we're looking to leverage those different ways of communication to extract the information that we're looking. So that's qualitative and quantitative data that helps us formulate our project goals. It helps us articulate our ambitions for this project, for the town of East Hampton and broadly, for us as society. And it helps us begin to formulate a program from which architecture can begin to be birthed. So Carol, if you go to the next slide. As she mentioned, we're on the eve of our engagement kickoff for the Senior Center, and that starts next Wednesday with a community listening session that's virtual. Again, trying to reach our audiences in different formats and forums. This virtual session will be formatted in kind of an open-ended yet facilitated series of discussions and breakout rooms. Our audience for this is any community member. So come one, come all, we're looking to hear from everyone about our ideals, our interests, our aspirations for this future senior center. And so we're looking to pair that then with a series of in-person discussions that kick us off next Friday at the senior center, talking to current users, spending a little bit of time seeing what the existing building looks like, understand the existing programs, as well as getting to talk with the staff of the senior center and the staff of the Human Services Department, which we're really excited about. And to cap off our engagement kickoff, we're having a listening session in the room that you're in today at the town hall. We'll have a series of exercises similar to those that you saw on the slide earlier, where we're looking to sort of extract and continue to get that sort of basic information of what is the future of this building, what is the future of East Hampton, and what are our shared aspirations. We're really excited. I don't think I can underscore that enough, and it's hard to communicate when we're on Zoom sometimes. We love this type of work, and we believe that an approach as inclusive as this helps enrich a project's outcomes and enrich the outcome that we're all looking for. So thank you so much for this opportunity to share a little bit of a peek into our process. And I think that's all we have teed up for a presentation. And I'm sure we're happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions at this point from board members?
I just have a quick comment,
go
if you
ahead.
don't mind. So my mother was at the senior center yesterday, and she's sort of come back to town and enjoying the yoga and, you know, getting herself healthy for her next trip and such. The one thing I wouldn't mind adding into potentially you say extract information would be to extract it maybe from high schoolers. You know, they might see their parents more than we might see them. Maybe they might have something. It could be a good little process for them to say, what do your parents need in 10 years, or what would you want in 30 years from this center? And I know we can outreach to some of the teachers at the high school, and maybe that's an idea, just to bring the youth into it a little bit also then too.
It's great.
Love the idea of future-proofing this. Yeah.
So what we're going to be doing to promote the engagement sessions, while the folks are here from R2, what Ryan did mention, the team is going to get a tour of the East Hampton Food Pantry, and we're going to be setting up a Zoom with Hugh King because they want to talk to him about, historical architecture and other things. To just, they looking really, and they have been immersing themselves in our community, which is really exciting. We're running ads in the local newspapers this week and next week to promote the event. I left flyers on, everybody's desk so that you can see what the community flyers look like. Diane is going to be, they're going to be out at the senior center. The folks that come to this 12-step groups will be able to access them as well. And then we're hoping the board will send out to your committees, that we'll send you flyers electronically. I know Joanne is drafting a short press release, and then we're looking to really push this out. Diane's team has, a huge list of community partners that we can share, the flyers with. And we just ask that we want to get the word out because, the more people that show up, the more voices that are heard, the more inclusive this is going to be.
Yeah, that's great, Kathy. And I think, public engagement is really a critical part of coming up with the design for this project and really taking into account the needs of the community. And this is a great process to go through in preparing for that. What is the timeline? I know you're planning Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, May 18th, 20th, 21st for those sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And then beyond that, what's the timeline?
Well, then we're looking that we might want to go to a survey beyond that. Once we hear from the folks that show up and engage with us, we may want to go with a broader instrument, right? And so we've talked about a survey. We've actually drafted, we have a draft of a survey. I think, we'll have to see where we go from here. I don't know if Renette or Carol want to chime in here as far as next steps after this initial engagement.
I would just say as soon as we get the data and we were able to review it and understand it, then we'll present a schedule for actually doing the design. And that schedule has several phases. So the schematic design, there are things we need to get in place in terms of surveying the site and just our two offices. Just, I forgot to say this earlier, but I'm local. I've been a member of the going to the Hamptons for 40 years now, I guess, and have a house there, and have participated in the Artist Writers Softball League for 35 years. So I'm currently president. So when I've engaged with some of our partners, everyone's so excited. So we're very excited to get this rolling and look forward to what our results are with our survey.
I think the idea of following up the workshops with surveys is a great one because I think we can all say here at the dais that trying to really connect with the general public, make sure people are aware of what's going on and that their input is desired is somewhat challenging at times. So the better involvement we get early in the process, the better the project will be in the end and better supported by the community overall.
Great. Well, hopefully the board will be able to be here on Saturday and the 21st and meet with our design team and get this kicked off.
Are there any other questions or comments from board members?
No, look forward to it, Kathy.
No, we look forward to working with R2 and thank you very much for joining us. This is really an important endeavor that we've been working on for some time, and it's great to see it finally getting started.
Thank you.
Publicly. We've been working feverishly behind the scenes here, but
sure. That and then the site acquisition was a really important milestone that we've passed, and so time to get started with the actual project being constructed. So thanks again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you the upcoming workshop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
See you
you.
next week.
Next on our agenda, before we move on, do we have any callers on the line, Jason?
We still have no callers on the line.
I think it's safe to take down the public comment number now. The next topic is the draft legislation for community housing fund. This is enabling legislation that would allow us to participate in the collection of a transfer tax that purchasers of property contribute to a fund. This was state legislation that was signed by the governor last year. And each of the 5 East End towns have to develop their own legislation, enabling legislation, and plan ahead of a November referendum. Our committee has been meeting multiple times in preparation for presenting this draft legislation. The committee members include Catherine Casey, who's with the Housing Authority, Rick Whalen, Thomas Crouch, Jonathan Yellen, and Jackie Lowy. And then ex officio members are myself, Tom Rule, our housing director, Jeremy Samuelson, the planning director, and Jennifer Nigro, our assistant town attorney. And Jennifer's here along with Thomas Crouch and Tom Rule to walk us through this draft legislation. So Jennifer, if you'd like to come up to the podium and start walking us through it.
I know from watching ZBA to get this microphone in the right position first. So this is a very exciting opportunity for the East End towns. I'm sure I don't have to tell this board what a struggle it is for people to live and work out here, the rising cost of housing, which is not unique to the East End, but we are certainly feeling it since the pandemic. The committee is divided into two. One is the outreach group and one is the drafting group. So you are seeing a piece of the drafting group right here. But I did want to just lightly summarize some of the comments that went into the draft introduction, which is in front of you, which was really beautifully worded and I think really well considered in what's the purpose behind this extra 0.5% transfer tax, which, just want to make it clear, would be paid by the buyer, not the seller. And would go into the Community Housing Opportunity Fund, or what the drafting committee now affectionately refers to as CHOF. So the purpose of the local law is to implement the authority given to the town to establish a dedicated local fund to provide a variety of needed housing opportunities as authorized by Chapter 445 of the laws of 2021, entitled An Act to Amend the Town Law and the Tax Law in relation to authorizing towns in the Peconic Bay region to establish community housing funds to be funded by a supplemental real estate transfer tax. We, the drafting committee, with that purpose in mind and the need of the community, took the existing Chapter 160 of the Town Code and added the language directly from the state law. And our proposed legislation essentially mirrors that law, including all of the bells and whistles that go with it. And on a practical note, I would like to point out that this is the type of transfer tax that really only, if you're doing the math, and Tom and Thomas have been helpful in that regard, it really kicks in when you're talking about homes that are being purchased for about $2 million and over. It is not something that's going to largely impact individuals who are coming in and under that range because of the exemptions, which go away after a certain threshold. So this is our draft before you. It mirrors the state law, which is also before you. And may I have any questions?
Yeah, I just want to make a couple comments quickly.
Sure.
One of the reasons that we decided to basically mimic the state law is that the state law is quite broad in enabling the use of funds. And we felt on the committee that it was important to be as flexible as possible in drafting the enabling legislation, because there may be situations that come up in the future that we may not contemplate at this time, which would be eligible under the state law. And we wanted to make sure that they would also be eligible under the town law. When Jennifer talked about the exemptions, there's a $400,000 exemption for the purchase property up to $2 million. And there's a $100,000 exemption for vacant land purchases as well, up to $2 million. And when you look at that increased threshold of exemption, because currently under the CPF law, the exemption is $250,000. And by upping that exemption, it sort of levels out so that for a property of $1 million purchase, there's no increase at all, even though there's a 0.5% tax added. because of that raised threshold. Also, first-time buyers are exempt from paying the tax, first-time home buyers. So there are, limits on the impact to a person purchasing, again, properties below $2 million. Are there any initial questions from board members at this point?
Just a couple. If you just,
Certainly.
I mean, I actually read the draft legislation, then the state law, and I probably should have done the opposite. But either way, it's about the same. And I think that's a wise move right now. Then too, I had a question about, as Peter just mentioned, that first-time home buyers can only go to first-time home buyers, but also if they have a significant other that hasn't bought a house within 3 years. Is that correct?
That is
Can
correct.
you just explain that also?
Sure. So the idea of what an eligible individual is, or a first-time home buyer.
Thank you. An eligible individual.
Eligible
And then also
individual.
resident, if you just discuss residency too.
Sure. So under the proposed legislation, and again, this is mirroring the state law, an eligible individual, let's break those down because they're two separate concepts, is a member of a household where the income of that household doesn't exceed 100% of the income limits as established by the state of New York Mortgage Agency Low Interest Rate Loan Program in non-target categories for Suffolk County in effect on the contract date for the sale of such property. That program I just mentioned, if you want to deep dive into that, I have Tom Rule here.
I will.
Who knows it?
I will.
It's like 155,000.
Yeah.
$180.
There we go.
That's the base. Yeah, that's my basic understanding of it. But Tom obviously has a lot more of a comprehensive understanding of it.
Which for out here and individuals, it opens up to a large pool of applicants potentially. I think that's what I wanted to make sure got pulled out in this discussion here then too, that it's, so housing's expensive. Sometimes salaries are a little bit better out east here than other locations, but the cost of living is expensive. That allows a lot of individuals that might be EMTs, teachers, and others then to still participate in this program without being exempted by that. And I think that's what I want to try to get out there to the public as we try to move this forward.
Agree. In fact, what's nice about this legislation is it's not just pulling in people who are, at or below a poverty line or even in a 5-figure line. You're talking about also including, for all intents and purposes, the middle class out here, the working middle class. In terms of what's a first-time home buyer, is an eligible individual who has not owned a primary residential property and is not married to a person who has owned a residential property during the 3-year period prior to that individual's purchase of the primary residential property, and who does not own a vacation home or an investment home. So you're really focusing in on your first-time buyer out here, someone who's not married to someone who already has property. The reason why I think the word married is in there is basically because in real property law, not to bore this board, but when you own property as a married couple, unless otherwise set forth in the deed, it is presumed to be owned in tenancy by the entirety. And that's very specific to married couples. I have not found anything in my research that indicates that that would apply to domestic partnerships in New York or any other type of legal union. But with married couples, that's what we're taught in law school, and it still remains the same today. And in a nutshell, tenancy by the entirety is simply that if one spouse dies, the other automatically inherits. So I believe that's what this legislation is really, the word married is really targeted there, because we did do a bit of thinking about whether or not that needed to be expanded, regardless of the state law language. So those are your eligible individual and first-time home buyer definitions.
So Jen, I have a question about the end of the first-time home buyer where it says that does not own a vacation or investment home. I would feel more comfortable if it said that they don't have interest in it. There are fractional home ownerships. There are, those kinds of investments that people make. And so it wouldn't show up as that they own a home, but they do own, or it could be in a trust.
Right, like a real estate investment trust. Yeah.
So that needs to be, I think, clarified.
So own or have an ownership interest. Mm-hmm. I think that's an excellent point.
And I know there's a committee. It's no less than 7, no greater than 15 on the committee. And I think the committee, which matches the state law, is great. And as we get deeper into it, I would just recommend that we would potentially look at representatives on that committee that would represent school districts and fire and emergency services then too.
Yes.
There is a list of required members. You have to have somebody from the banking industry, somebody from real estate industry, et cetera. So that's specified. And as you say, David, that, and again, this is the advisory committee that we're talking about here that would be formed. It mirrors to some degree the Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee for CPF, which reviews and vets proposals for expenditure of water quality funds. This committee would be formed and act in the same way. There was discussion about making some of the aspects of the program administrative, so the committee wouldn't review it. For instance, if you're a first-time home buyer, you wouldn't have to go to the committee as long as you can provide proof that you're a first-time home buyer. That could be handled administratively, or for down payment assistance, some of those types of things, where the committee would review and vet would be proposals to use community housing fund for the development of properties, for instance, apartments or single-family homes, perhaps in shared equity situations as well. So we would want to, for efficiency purposes, steer those administrative processes around the committee and have the committee deal with, the projects for the most part.
Because I would imagine there's a lot of confidential information that would need to be shared if I was going to be taking part, say, as a first-time home buyer. I'm guessing social security numbers, your, maybe W-2s, tax, your previous year's tax filings. I mean, that's not something, you want being circulated among the committee for review. So I think that we have to just figure out how we're going to guard people's, personal information. If in fact, somebody has to, on the committee or somehow, however it functions, I don't know if it's through Tom's office, which I'm sure he's dealing with that kind of information now. That's obviously highly confidential and private, how that gets managed. The other question, I had questions about the advisory board. David, how many are on the water quality? Because that's a really highly functioning committee.
There are a lot of people in the committee.
Because it just seems that 15.
There's got to be a dozen at least.
It's a lot of.
It's
I know it's up to.
It has to be at least 7. It just can't be more than 15.
I wouldn't necessarily use that committee as an example for how many you should have. You have to have between 7 and 15. How big of a committee? It's too big.
Yeah.
So
I think there's 10 to 12
we could
with
discuss
representatives.
that. And again, that's, we can delve into that a little bit more when we go around, start talking about actually forming that committee. We would have to first have the legislation adopted. The plan will be presented. There'll be a referendum. Once, when the referendum passes, there's a 60-day period until you can start collecting funds as part of the transfers. So it's not likely that we would, collect funds before, the first of the year of 2023. So, we have a little bit of time to work out the details of the committee. We still have some time to work on the details of the plan, which we'll be discussing next week. We wanted to separate these two things out. Again, the legislation, enabling legislation itself is pretty straightforward and encompasses all the aspects that the state enabling legislation has, again, to be flexible. But some of the particulars of how we would administer and what would be eligible expenses, we can talk about more as the plan develops.
But I'd like to understand what's in the legislation. So we're saying, it's mimicking the state legislation, but it says 3 representatives of local housing advocacy or human service organizations. So how would that be defined, here when it is that the East Hampton Housing Authority? Is that the Sag Harbor Community Trust, or is that the group YIMBY that has recently
You could
started?
bring in members
Yes,
of
in
each.
my,
I was going
okay.
to say, I believe
then-
it contemplates a combination of those things.
So when it says human service organizations, is that things like the Retreat, Eleanor Whitmore, Project Most?
That's correct.
That's how it's defined.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's how we read it.
Yeah, exactly. We
Caveat that.
interpret
That's
it
how
that
we
way.
read it. Because those are the aspects of the community that would understand certain items or situations that maybe aren't as apparent to an everyday onlooker.
I have a couple of questions,
Sure.
if I may. Under 160 I think it's 4 in the new version, purpose of the fund.
Yes.
Under number 7, I'm doing the part, as you all know, of searching for, through the GIS, needle in a haystack properties, as I call it. And I was just wondering if on number 7, it says interest, the acquisition of interest in real property in existing housing units. Can vacant land be included in that as well? If we identify a parcel, or if someone would like to sell the town a vacant parcel for community housing, we could accept that vacant parcel?
I'm not sure if this particular provision encompasses that, because it uses the term straight out of the state legislation of existing housing units, which have a definition and doesn't necessarily talk about vacant land or unimproved property.
Yeah. Would we have the ability to insert something like that?
We can certainly look into it. Yeah. I
Thanks.
just want to make sure that we're not.
Right. And I think that under that, I'm really happy to see what the adoption of the housing plan will encompass to conservation, coordination, community design, transportation. These are all big pieces of the entire
Infrastructure
community puzzle. Also under conservation, I was wondering if, energy conservation or anything like that would necessarily need to be included.
I would think so.
I think the vacant land is taken into account in 2 under purposes of the fund.
I thought I saw it in there.
The actual production of community housing for sale to individuals who are eligible. So I think that would encompass
Right. Because you're going to build.
acquiring and building.
Also under B.
Under A?
B.
Oh.
Eligible expenses.
Okay.
And is this list under B, the eligible expenses, is this a finite list or?
This under B, we're still under 160-4.
Yes.
This actually comes from
Great.
our code. The only thing that's different is that we put a header on it. So whether it's finite is really up to this board, and if there are suggestions to expand it.
Yeah, it says land acquisition.
Yeah, I see that. That's good.
It says
This is where we already had it in
not be
place.
limited to. Shall include but not limited to. So you could have.
Yeah, that's where that
Some other
flexibility is
situation.
important.
Yeah.
So can I just ask the next steps on here, if you don't mind? Is it finalizing the draft based on this conversation? And then is it an outreach, program of outreach towards the referendum? Or do we change our code?
This would be
after?
adopted before.
That's what I mean.
This would need to be adopted.
Step is, and I think we want to try to have that in place by June.
Okay.
And have the plan finalized as well, so that folks are well aware of what it includes ahead of the referendum. That gives us, plenty of time to circulate the plan.
And I should add that if the legislation is adopted, we also have correspondingly amended a section of the code, or added a section of the code that would be transfer text specifically for this.
Thank you.
So the committee felt that this draft was pretty close to final form, wanted to present it to town board members to review and get some comments on. And then we can schedule that for a public hearing. And then, as I said earlier, next week we'll be discussing the actual plan, which is a component as well. And that spend a little bit more time on discussion. We'll have that draft circulated to you as soon as we have it in the final draft form.
The plan's the exciting part.
Yeah, this is a little dry.
Sorry.
It's a little dry, and it's pretty broad in terms of what's acceptable. I think it's important for people to understand that it will function much like the Community Preservation Fund functions in terms of the monies received will be held in the fund for housing. That will be administered by the finance department. It will be audited on a regular basis, on an annual basis, to make sure that expenditures are all in compliance with the law. So there are those checks and balances as well. And I think this is perhaps the most important tool that the town will have to address the housing crisis. I want to thank Assemblyman Fred Thiel, who sponsored this bill, got it to pass the legislature twice. Former governor did not sign it into law. Our current governor, Kathy Hochul, signed it into law late last year. And so now it's up to us to pick up the baton and get this across the finish line so that we can, have a meaningful impact on addressing this crisis.
So I do have a question. We have a community housing opportunity fund committee, and there's money in the fund. So does the money in that fund then transfer into this new fund, or are we going to call the old fund something else?
So you can receive funds from any source to put into the fund, but the funds going out can only be used for specific purposes. So you could have land or money donated to that fund by members of the public. You could transfer general fund balances into that fund. Money from CHOF could go into that fund. I think, the way we're thinking about this is that, CHOF was kind of out ahead of this legislation by decades.
Yeah.
In preparation for this day. And so we're really ahead of the game. And so I think consolidating that makes sense. And, I think I would certainly consider when we have that committee formed that we look at the existing CHOF membership for some of that membership as well for the advisory committee.
But the funding, right now, the thinking is it's going to roll over. And if this legislation, this referendum passes.
The intention for the existing CHOF funds is the same as what the new fund would be. So to me, it would make sense to just roll that into the new community housing fund. And you could call it the Community Housing Opportunity Fund, I suppose, but
that's what it's called.
That's what it's called.
Yeah. That was the confusion.
Otherwise known as the fund.
Our current fund is called what the future fund would be, right?
Peter's correct, though. You were already ahead of this. In fact, when this first came onto my desk, the first thing Tom ruled was to send me, here's 160. Oh, this will be a breeze.
Yeah, so we didn't have to start from scratch for this, which was helpful, I think, in a lot of ways. And you've already got community activists that are working and part of the community of the CHOF committee. So I think a lot of and we produced 2 documents in the last couple of years that show the need that is there, and it backed it up with data. And I think that's also important for the community to hear. And I know Jeremy Samuelson, the new director, and Eric Shantz is also updating that so that we'll see, I'm sure, the median home price, I think in 2018 was almost $1 million in the town of East Hampton. I think when they update it, we're going to see that number even go higher.
Oh, yeah.
So all of those things are important, I think, for the community in educating the community so that they have something to look at. And so CHOF is working on that now, and we'll Look, we like the name.
Any other questions for Jen at this point?
No.
So is there a public hearing date that you're shooting for, Peter?
Well, I guess it really depends on whether or not there's anything else to add. The board members feel this is ready to go to a public hearing?
I mean, I have a minor tweak on like the introduction, but I was going to talk to Joanne about
So
that.
let's discuss it next week. Again, if there are any other final revisions or whatever and then at that point we could schedule for a public hearing.
First week of June.
On the 19th. We could set the public hearing on the 19th of May. And that would be the first week in June. Possibly the second.
And then you have June 2nd or June 16th.
Yes.
Good job.
Very good.
So Jen, we gave you some things to look at.
Yes.
So those will be done and then you'll send us a new.
Yes, I can jump on that. In fact, I actually have a draft that has the introduction
Okay.
poured in. I didn't want to circulate it unless and until we were done looking
Okay.
at the intro. So if you'd like me to send that to the board and circulate it, might make your life easier in tweaking it and looking at it in one document.
Okay.
I can do that right after.
Sounds good.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, I want to thank the members of the committee, Tom and John Yellen and Casey, Jackie Lowy, Tom Roll, Jen Nigro, Rick Whalen. Good job, everyone.
Yep. Thank you guys. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
That brings us up to New York Stretch Code, and we have Samantha Klein here from Natural Resources to discuss, bring us up to date
There's
on
a
the
new-
latest revisions.
I think this is the new revision.
We also have somebody with Michael, Michels, in the waiting room.
He's for the next one.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Hope I have the right copy. Good morning,
Good,
Samantha.
good morning. I guess it is still morning. Good morning, Sam.
Morning.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You may recall that we had adopted a version of this, mainly because of some issues that were from the language. We typically provide that are compliant with codes and compliance in the future, and that's one revision. It's working without this.
Pardon me, John, would you do me a favor of talking into the microphone?
Oh, sorry. Let's turn the other way. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The other thing we did look at here is to try to provide sort of a scale for smaller houses not to be hit too hard with requirements for upgrades if they're doing a renovation of a house or building a smaller house. So we kind of tempered these requirements a little bit, and they increase as the house gets larger in size. And I just, the highlighted portion is a revision of one of the prior revisions, just to clarify how a house that's 3,000 square feet or smaller is different from the next size up. And more than that, I'll defer to Samantha with the more technical aspects of this, but.
Yeah, definitely. Redacting the stretch code temporarily, it gave us an opportunity to hear back from NYSERDA, Newport Ventures, the Department of State Attorneys, as well as our local builders. So Ann Glennon really provided us with some great feedback, and we wanted to make the energy code requirements so that buildings in the town are being built to a higher energy efficiency standard, but still being understanding of the smaller homes, having a little bit more flexibility and options to reach those standards.
Great. So there's very little change here from when we initially passed this legislation. Are there any comments or questions about those minor changes?
No. And again, just to reiterate, the dwellings, 1 or 2 family dwellings up to 3,000 square foot, it's not, it's giving them flexibility on how they achieve the rating, but the rating still needs to be achieved.
Right.
Yes.
And what that does overall then too, sometimes the smaller buildings have a smaller budget and individual on a more of a smaller defined income and building costs are expensive. So it allows that individual to go through the building, but still try to meet the code. So that flexibility is warranted, I believe.
Anything else for Jen?
No, I'm good.
For Sam? Thanks so much, Sam.
Great. Thank you.
That brings us up to marine refueling legislation. And we have John Jelnicki.
Yeah, someone might be in the waiting room, or
Yep,
I think
I also have Dee Brown.
Ed Michaels.
Yep. Yeah, Dave might be in the waiting room, and I think Ed and
Yep.
Here comes Ed.
yes.
Oh, that's the question.
Tim.
Oh, yeah.
Little elevator music, maybe.
Right on cue.
Nope, I gotta find it again.
Signing photographs out there. What's it?
Probably,
We're waiting for it.
probably giving advice.
Do you want me to go out there and tell them
You're
that?
going to have to go out there because Tom Rule's talking to them. They'll never be able to break free. So we have discussed this issue before more than once. I think it goes back to at least the Wilkinson administration when we first started discussing this. And really the issue is about the use of town properties for refueling of vessels. And this generally takes place with a tanker truck, fueling from land onto the boat. And there, have been some concerns about potential for spills, what type of fuel could be transferred from the dock to boats, and what kind of precautions, who's allowed to do it, when they're allowed to do it, if they're allowed to do it, whatnot. So the draft is kind of going around this. I haven't seen this legislation in this form before. And it has a few different aspects, but we're really only talking about Gann Road at this point. Is that right?
That's correct.
So
Gann Road.
Gann Road is a commercial dock owned by the town. It's the home of a number of fishing vessels. And of course, there's the pump out station there as well at Gann Road. And of course, Marine Patrols also has a station there with their vessels. So are you prepared to run us through the legislation, David or Tim?
Sure. Well, basically, the legislation basically speaks to a lot of what you just mentioned. The individuals that are allowed to fuel boats there will have to have certain safety equipment. They'll have to have a boom, spill containment devices, which we also have at our facility in the event that more was needed. It would be diesel fuel only. There's a few other specs on that. I didn't write that up. I wasn't involved in writing that up, so I'm not quite sure exactly what some of the other specs on that were, but that's pretty much the bottom line, that it would be. And the reason for it is, though, is that some of the larger boats that fuel there, they can't pull into another marina to get fuel. That's the reason we were allowing it, because they have nowhere else to get fuel.
So that was one of the things being discussed, I know, in the past, is whether we limit this to just vessels that are constrained by their length or draft and unable to fuel at other facilities. I think that's important because I know that marinas have invested tens of thousands of dollars to put in their safe fueling stations and to maintain them. And they have all of that equipment, booms, whatever, on site to address a spill. I would be concerned about how these transactions are set up. Are we saying that this is open to any company that wants to fuel boats, or do they have to be specifically certified as to the safety procedures and how to deploy booms for vessels when there's a spill. So should we limit the fuel in that way? And that's been one of the concerns I've had in the past, is if you have just anybody can go fuel, then it's a lot harder to stay on top of in terms of whether or not they're in fact certified to deploy, the spill response. Are they responsible for providing the spill response equipment? Are we talking about providing that at that location? I know Marine Patrol's there, so you do have some equipment for response there or elsewhere, but I just want to know where the onus for this goes, and whether or not there's going to be insurance required of those providers, listing the town as additionally insured. So
I would think that that's all appropriate. So, and here is that we want to make sure that the operator has their own equipment. The town invests in the capital and putting equipment in at many of our harbors as a just in case, because it just could be any type of fuel spill. So we did have that capital investment, I believe, almost 2 years ago now. The other option right now is by certifying, having the fuel operators and trucks certified by a Coast Guard certification. And do we do it by a town permit also? And in that town permit will allow them to operate. We know who's operating, and that they would have to do that on an annual basis with their trucks being looked at by the fire marshal also.
Yeah, I think all those safety aspects are important to incorporate. And I don't know what the limit is on the boat size. I think for 3 Mile Harbor, you could probably fuel a 65-foot boat at private marina, couldn't you?
Yes, you could be very close to that. But once you get over, say, 60, but we can't, we're not going to go, even at Gann Road, there probably wouldn't be room, depending on what commercial boats are currently berthed, for us to do much larger than an 80, 90-foot vessel. Maybe once we did do a 120-foot vessel at Gann Road. But I absolutely agree with everything that both of you said. I think it should be by permit. That way, for sure they can list the town as additionally insured on their liability policy. We can make sure that they have the proper equipment and that they know, to go through the proper notification. So the way that would work is, say if they have an appointment to fuel a boat, just so we can keep track of it, they would notify me. I can send an email to all the other harbor masters who are that way. Whoever's on duty that day can make sure they're aware that there's a boat being fueled, and that we can make sure that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, under those auspices, I think that's appropriate to allow that type of fueling in those situations.
So just let me understand. So are we going to say a boat between this size and this side are the ones that can come to Gann Road?
That's a very good question. I think that we should do some research on that and find out what the minimum size. Chief, did you ever look into that?
Oh, it depends on how they can get into the size.
You want to come to the podium, please?
If the marina can't handle it size-wise, then they have no place to fuel.
Okay.
So I would say if they cannot fit into a fuel dock at 3 Mile Harbor, then they have to come to the town dock and meet the requirements of this code. There is occasionally in a Montauk one too. Every now and then you'll get a big yacht club boat, 150, 200 foot, that can't get fuel, and they would try to get the commercial guys to let them use Star Island. That's the only place you can do it. And they have to come to me with that. And I find it hard I can't say no to a boat that needs fuel that cannot fit into a marina. Right. That's my problem. If it can fit in, go over there.
Right. Exactly.
I absolutely will not go with price. Price is not my problem.
Right. No, I understand. So I agree with what you're saying. I just don't know how to fit it in. We need to fit it into this legislation.
If it can't fit at the fuel dock, that's what we've been doing.
Okay.
As the boss said, it's just been since Bill Wilkinson and Larry, and we come up with this back then. If it can't fit in, then.
If you can't fit in.
We'll just have to make sure that's reflected in the legislation.
Right. Okay.
And that could be our judgment call too, because some of these boats are longer, but draw no water.
Right.
Some are shorter, but draw too much water.
Exactly.
So it's not all equal. You could say, well, a 65-footer could fit at the dock, but it draws 6 or 7 feet.
Right.
It's not going to work.
Can't get in.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have to define fit.
Right. And that could be something you could leave to us that it would, not work that way. But I agree with all the stuff you guys asked for on the permit. Absolutely. And it needs to be just to certain people so we can train them and make sure they understand the rules.
Right. Trained and permitted.
David, do you have any comments on this at all? Chief Fire Marshal David Brown?
I'm in total agreement with this. I think it's a great idea. It's going to up our safety, plus, any kind of environmental impact. We're going to be right on top of it right away, rather than, waiting for somebody to catch them or find them. We'll be able to, we'll know right away when they're going to be there. We can check up on them. And then the inspection of the vehicles is going to be huge. If we get these vehicles to make sure that they're carrying the equipment to, to remediate any spills, and also, that they're trained, knowing that they're trained, I think would be huge.
And John Jolnicki, you're going to notice, John Jolnicki, we're looking to notice this in two different sections of the code. Is that correct?
Yeah, you have to do one law per section. So one is in waterways and boats, which basically just says you can't fuel, unless Chapter 120, which is docks, allows for fueling, and makes it a violation if you do that with not in compliance with Chapter 120. And then 120 sets forth all the requirements for utilizing a dock for fueling a boat. And the only dock that we have in there present is Gann Road. It's the only town dock that we talk about. There's space in there for, it says reserved for futures. So if you wanted to add another location some future time, you could, without too much of a change to the code. But basically 120 is where all of the kind of the meat of the legislation sits.
And what was the other chapter for waterways and boats?
246, I think it is.
246?
Yeah, I believe it's 246.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so board comfortable with those suggestions?
Absolutely.
So we'll get a draft rewritten and bring it back.
Yeah, I'll work with John. We'll get the draft rewritten this week. We can rediscuss it in my liaison report next week. If you feel comfortable, we can notice it on the 19th for June also. But it'd be nice to get it done, even though diesel cost is very high right now.
There may not be a lot of
Are
demand.
you sure you want these?
Yeah. It's something a long time coming, and I think it protects what the policy has been, but it also protects the environment. I think that's what we're looking for here then too. And I'll get that to you, and maybe we can get this one done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Very well. Michaels.
Thank you.
Chief Brown. Thank you. That concludes our agenda items. We now have liaison reports. Kathy, do you have a liaison report?
I do. Last Friday, the Springs Park Committee met, and we have two new members, Gina Chavez and Devlin Elliott. Scott Wilson gave an update. The town has completed its annual mow of the park. A couple of months ago, we had voted on a resolution to purchase double gates. With everything else in the pandemic, they've been, back order. So I guess we're getting closer to getting those installed. They're double gates to help protect dogs from running into the parking lot or for deer to get into the park. Prior to that work being done, there'll be signs posted at the dog park to let people know that there'll be some work there. And then we had some of the members of the committee are looking to organize an early summer cleanup. So they're designing flyers and they'll be posting them at the park and promoting it on social media. And since this committee meets quarterly, our next meeting is scheduled for the second week in August. The East Hampton Citizens Advisory Committee met last week as well. Some of the old business we discussed was the intersection at Stephen Hans Path, Old Northwest and Cedar Street. If you remember, they had requested a traffic study be done there. We got a draft proposal back from McLean, which we need to review, and we haven't brought to the town board yet, but we need to find a funding mechanism for that since it wasn't in the capital plan. And then the new business that we brought up was the South Fork Wind, potentially utilizing properties along the Springs Fireplace corridor as a laydown yard for storage of materials and equipment. And since there was some misinformation being circulated a few weeks back, Councilwoman Rogers was kind enough to come to the CAC and just give an overview of the project, what the needs were for the laydown yards, and answer any questions. And then I guess it was the end of last week, we got a letter from the CAC, which hadn't been discussed on the call. They must have done that via email, but I just wanted to read it. So regarding this South Fork Wind Project. So dear Kate and Kathy, thank you for taking the time to address the East Hampton Sag Harbor CAC regarding recent communications pertaining to the South Fork Wind Project. Our committee has discussed the project on multiple occasions, and we are grateful for your time and attention. It is our understanding that a site within our catchment area is under consideration as a staging area for Ørsted Eversource's operations in laying infrastructure and storing associated materials. The presentation regarding permits, oversight, and due diligence was reassuring, and we trust the town board has taken every precaution to protect and serve East Hampton town residents. The committee supports the town's efforts to wean off fossil fuel energy generation toward a more sustainable, viable future that meets the needs of the community while lessening environmental detriment. Thank you all for your efforts to protect and preserve our environment while moving toward renewable energy sources in service to the community. And that was from the East Hampton CAC. Also just wanted to talk a minute about the East Hampton Housing Authority. They've got some exciting news. Their 3 Mile Harbor Affordable Apartment Project is the recipient of the 2022 Smart Growth Award from Vision Long Island. Katie Casey, the executive director, will be at our meeting next week when we have our all hands on housing. She's going to be making a presentation about the 3 Mile Harbor project, as well as giving an overview of the other projects that the Housing Authority manages, because I think there's some confusion. Not everybody in the community know who, all the players are on the affordable housing front. So she'll be able to share more information about that. And also, over the years, town boards have waived escalating fees for fire alarms. And it goes back decades, quite frankly. And just to make things easier and cleaner, I have a resolution that I'm offering today that covers all of the East Hampton Housing Authority properties in one resolution so that the clerk's office doesn't have to go back a decade or more. And then I'm going to also have a resolution on for today that amends Chapter 167, littering and dump control. We had that public hearing on April 7th. The intent of the changes was to expand the definition of litter to include gravel, loam, dirt, and other debris, prohibit drag out on public roadways, and to ensure that the contents of any vehicle within the town containing yard waste is covered and secured. We had to wait for the transcript to be posted. It's the week's time has elapsed. So I didn't really want to wait until the 19th and brought it on for today. And that's what I have.
Thanks, Kathy.
Sure.
David, you have Liaison Report?
Yes, I do. Thank you so very much. I want to let everyone know that there's going to be a resolution on for this coming next Thursday. Sorry. Thank you. It's going to be a change for the Lions Field in Montauk, the IA engineering change order. What we didn't notice is that they're on that same property, which is the state right away. There's actually 2 bathrooms on there. The bathrooms over by the fishing station was never certified, so we are finishing that off so that we can then upgrade the septic system at Lions Field. So there's a small change order, and I'll get that information to everyone. Talking about bathrooms, also, I'll stay with this one. The Westlake Comfort Station, I know we bonded that. We are in the permitting process now through the state. The timing of that, it's going to look like we're going to push that back so that it'll be installed after the summer season right now. We don't necessarily want it to affect the majority of the summer season at all. So we're pushing that back a little. We were hoping to see if we can squeak it in, but based on the permitting from the state, we're going to delay that a little bit, but it's still on moving forward. That brings me up into the second part of that, which was the fisheries gear storage. The Fisheries Advisory Committee, we had a meeting last Friday. A nice discussion there. We talked a couple of things about gear storage. Specifically, what came up was that we have gear storage locations that we do at Star Island, also at Gann Road, and potentially this new location behind the Westlake Comfort Station. And we discussed this also in our SLIPS committee about a month ago, that since Star Island, we're gonna have to remove all the gear that's there right now for the impending construction projects. We're interested and they are supportive of doing a very small charge potentially for a plot of area for gear storage with a deposit just in case any gear storage is abandoned. Yeah. And it would be something very nominal for that, but the charge that would be for the removal would be a charge that would make sure that we would have enough money to remove any of the gear that were there. They were completely supportive with that, as along with the slips committee. I will continue to work through that. We have a little bit of time, but we've talked to many of the fishermen that would either be for nets, draggers, or even more importantly, a lot of the lobster pot fishermen, the fixed gear storage on there then too. Again, it's something that we're looking to make money on. It's making sure that everyone has an amount of space they might need, but also that abandoned gear stored gear can be removed then too. We did discuss then also, we have an upcoming meeting in Riverhead in June. It's the Mid-Atlantic States is actually coming to Riverhead for discussion. We do have one representative from the local area on that. That's Dan Farnham Sr. And it's one of we haven't had this opportunity, I believe, almost 7 years. I don't know if you remember, Peter, when that Mid-Atlantic States was in our area. We're going to have another meeting upcoming in which they might make some recommendations to the town board if we wanted to send a letter in just about our area and discussing this also with Southampton. Recently in paper, there has been some discussions about some sound emitters. Sorry, let me get the right language on that. HMS Fisheries Acoustic Monitoring Tagging and some of the devices that they're using for their base mats on there and being very large, again, gear entanglements. The FAC committee is recommending a deconfliction of these impediments instead of just leaving them. And that deconfliction hopefully will be removal of them, but also notification of where they are then too. And I can get more information on that and then send that to you, Kate. We'll discuss it as a board then too.
So those acoustic monitors are picking up pings off fish tags as they migrate by?
That's correct. So there's two studies. There's one that's out there right now where they use very large concrete bases, 500 pounds, and they're getting gear entanglements. There's new ones, a new study coming up with the gentleman from...
So that those locations are not made known to the fishermen so they can't avoid them?
That's what they stated.
So they want avoidance, or they just want them, the ones that are discontinued, removed, or what?
Deconfliction would be removed. And then they're in about 60 fathoms of water. And then just also the knowledge of where they're at too. There's another study that's about to happen with a gentleman, marine biologist from the north, from the New England aquarium, which they're going to use smaller mats on there in some of the areas of all the wind farms also. And those mats are only going to be about 75 pounds, but they also can be removed then too. So they're looking for that deconfliction of these ones because there's been some drag or some gear that's been entangled on them. Mm-hmm. That goes into gear loss. Other discussion was about gear loss claims. They've said that they're looking for some defined clarity on any updates in that process of gear loss. The process gets changed at times, and what they're looking to do is if there could be an outreach and notification on those changes when they happen to the fisheries of FACs or the fisheries liaisons or to the ports, it would assist anyone that might have gear loss claims to know exactly what the proper process is, as it might have changed at that time. They really rather not have any changes, but if it does get changed, an outreach of those changes so they can so the fishermen can be aware of that if they do get entanglements. Lastly, we did discuss some of the happenings that are happening at Ediacar Pier, which is at Rods Valley, and some of the squid fishing that's happening out there. They would be supportive of a management plan action that would actually limit fishing on that pier at nighttime on there, and then look at the greater code changes of the code that would look at docks and piers also then too. That leads me into aquaculture. There's a lot going on in aquaculture, as I've been told by John Dunn. They seem to be back to normal, the aquaculture department, as far as production, because it's been down the last 2 years for multiple reasons. We have several million oysters at the nursery and several million clams at the hatchery ready to go into the nursery. The fourth oyster spawn is planned for this week, and they are designated for spat on the shell, which can use for potential oyster reefs. They're starting to condition and preparing to spawn scallops to spawn very shortly. Hopefully this will allow to get a jump start on the scallop production season. As we all know, that's been down in the last couple of years. One of the options that we're also looking for predation besides also bacteria is to actually cage in specific areas of scallops with buoy and cage them to make sure that is a cow nose raise, is a bacterial level. So let's do some of the studies that were within the PEP plan. If conditioning in the hatchery succeeds, we'll have a jump start in the season for the scallops. And as we know right now, the waters are still quite cool compared to normal right now, in order of several degrees below normal.
The air temperatures are quite cool too.
Exactly right.
The brisk wind.
Yep. The sugar kelp project that was funded by the Water Quality was wrapping up shortly due to the fact that it's a winter crop. Unfortunately, several of the lines and the locations were damaged due to the icing situations in the harbor, heaving. So many that in the winter, many of them yielded no sugar kelp at all. The most productive site was Shipyard Lane in Cabonic. It was covered with slip cut, which is a form of algae kelp. Sneeze knot. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, geez. Oh, boy, there's a term I'm not ready.
As well as some sugar kelp. So, there's lessons learned, and we'll come back with some more information on that shortly if they would like to do it again. But again, it wasn't that much more labor put out because it is a winter product. So it did keep the department going, and they'd probably like to do it shortly again. Oyster gardeners have refloated the first and had the first maiden session on the 30th of April, and the next maiden session for oyster gardens, community oyster gardens, is scheduled for the weekend of the 21st. And it was noted, as most people are looking forward to the wind dropping and temperatures rising. Barley, exactly correct.
Exactly correct.
We had a meeting of the 395 of Panago Affordable Housing Project, and we are zeroed in on some of our options. And with the supervisor's permission, we're going to move that forward to a public hearing. No, sorry, a work session next week as all hands on housing, as Kathy mentioned. And I'll get information to the board by tomorrow, actually, on this. It's been a great group, and we have some great options to move this forward for home ownership. In Montauk, I want to talk about Montauk and some of the beaches out there. We're having a delay based on the weather right now. We delayed the beach nourishment. We're working with the county on that. The contractor will be mobilizing this week and starting to place sand on the beach in downtown Montauk starting next week, as the weather is supposed to be, the winds are supposed to diminish by that time. Again, this is part of the Army Corps of Engineers management plan that we have to do, and we'll be a little bit delayed, but we hope then we don't get any nor'easters like we did last year on Memorial Day, and we'll have a good season out there. I haven't been out there since the blow this week, but I look forward to check and see where we're at, and they'll be moving. This leads me into, as we discuss some parking right-of-way upgrades in Montauk and parking restrictions. I know I brought this up a couple of months ago. Still like to try to move forward on majority of that. I'll send an email to the board again with those locations, what was recommended, and what some supply chain issues might have delayed in some of that overall philosophy out there then too. But the right-of-way parking upgrades that we might be looking at, we can take care of now using funding sources that we have noticed parking in lieu of, and move on that, and I'll send the maps up to the board for their discussion. This leaves me into another long-term option that I would still like to move forward on. I still think it's appropriate to move forward on adding at least 5 parking spots, about 100 feet of parking in the right-of-way at Dolphin Drive. I will send an email to the board to see if there's support for that, but I think that's a perfect location to add more parking so we can get more people to the beaches without detracting from the neighborhood, and then also keeping within the town right-of-way then too. Lastly, in Montauk, I've been working with Jen Folks in the Chamber of Commerce and Jeremy Samuelson about a county grant that they have moving forward. And the county grant is a small grant for downtown revitalization. It's not the large one, the millions of dollars from the state. This one is, I don't know if we've ever applied for one. We haven't been granted one through what I've seen in the last 6 years. It's a grant that has to be submitted on the 22nd. But what we're looking to do is use grant funding and design a grant that would be strong for redoing Wi-Fi and electrical work on the green for all the events that we have out there. On the north side, paving the north side of the shoulder, which is crumbly, and putting in a mounting curb on there also. These are all some infrastructure needs that will also make it just look prettier, if you want to say. It's a funding source. We'll see if we're successful on it. I'll get information to the board by the end of the week, as we would have to pass our secret on that and do it as a board resolution. The grant actually goes, we would have to give a support to it, but the grant actually goes in through the Chamber of Commerce, who would be writing the grant, who is writing the grant and preparing for that. But we thought we would give it a shot and see why not. So much of the money for this grant comes from Montauk and from the hotel taxes. So it'd be nice to see if we can do something strong to pull it back and to upgrade and update that area of the village, which gets a lot of heavy use right now, and giving it good enough justification as we move forward.
And it's very fitting that you identified the chamber, David, since they do the farmers market on the green, they have all the concerts on the green, and it's perfect.
Well, I thank you for that. I do have to say that we sent it out to a couple organizations. The chamber was the one that said, that they sort of said, let's take this one on in this location. If this is successful, maybe we do it other ways. But again, yeah, it's a focal point of Montauk. I know Buildings and Grounds is out there right now repainting the gazebo, and they're going to remove a couple of the shrubs that's been requested by the MBA. Redoing the planks out there. It is a focal point for Montauk, and yeah, I'm happy that the chamber is working on this with us too, with the town. And with that, that's what I have.
Thank you, David. Sylvia, do you have a report for us?
I do. The Waynescott CAC met on Saturday. The guest speaker was David Egan, who is president of the Waynescott School Board. And he described the school, which is a K through 3, as a collaborative open setting. He discussed the upcoming school budget and the school board election, which is May 17th. He also talked about contracts that they have with Bridgehampton, Sag Harbor for their tuition students, as well as East Hampton. So they can choose any of those 3 schools. By New York State, Waynescott is considered a common school district, which was a new term for me. It's along with Sagaponack, New Suffolk, and Fisher's Island on Long Island are the schools that are considered common, and that's because they are defined as having less than 8 teachers in their school system. Also, the Waynescott Tree.
Where were they? It's Fisher's Island.
Fishers, New Suffolk, Sagaponack, and Waynescott.
Cool. Thank you.
Trivia.
Trivia. That's true.
It's a trivia question. You can see that at some point.
New Suffolk would have gotten me.
Me too. The Waynescott Tree Society, which is really an offshoot of the Waynescott CAC, is now getting its own 501c3, however, planted a dogwood at the Waynescott Green to celebrate Arbor Day. And again, congratulated them for a new organization. I think they've come a long way in a very short time. So really want to thank all those folks that are involved with that Tree Society, getting it off the ground so successfully.
Absolutely.
It's in bloom right now and beautiful.
Yeah, that's nice, isn't it? And it's going to mimic the tree that was planted for Rico Mastro. So you've got, some things going on there that are at the beginning of that hamlet and beginning of East Hampton that look really beautiful. Councilwoman Kate Rogers also provided a report that I read to the group from South Fork Wind. And there were a few airport questions regarding the SEQA review. And they're all aware of the closing and opening date coming up. And I can ask, maybe John knows, the question was if if the town board decides that a slot system might be advantageous after the season, does that system have to also go through a SEQA review?
If that's something, well, yeah, I mean, that's something should be one of the potential alternatives that we could include in the review, which we're just getting into.
Okay.
The beginning of the EIS at this point. How detailed we need to go into it, I don't know, because it's still a matter of limiting the number of accesses to the airport. And that would provide us with a spacing system too between the aircraft, which would be helpful, I think.
My understanding was
yeah.
that would probably be covered.
Yeah, it's kind of like a
EIS.
like a subcategory of what we're looking at.
Then we'll have comments at the end of that before we adopt the final. So there'll be additional opportunity to
it will go to a hearing. That's right.
To do that.
Yeah. I mean, we're not really sure how we're going to get where we want to be and what we need until we get the data. So, but the whole concept of it is that it's flexible enough for us to really pursue any of these alternatives.
Okay.
The reason I think it hasn't been pursued is we have never been able to figure out a way to make that mechanism work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we struggled with that.
Yeah.
For years.
Back in 2015,
when I was the liaison. I mean, I can't tell you how many meetings of the AMAC we devoted to trying, and we had some pretty smart minds working on it. And
I think the question was more, they'd heard that the discussions about slots had taken place during this whole transition and before. And if it was subject to secret separately, does each thing now that happens, they wanted to see a conclusion at the end of the season. And if everything if we come to some conclusions, but they then have to go through secret, then we're on the spinning wheel of always having to go through.
No, you shouldn't. I mean, unless it's something that's way afield of what we're even considering right now.
Yeah.
But we're
okay.
not,
but I just wanted to reassure them.
Yeah. The whole concept that we're trying to do is to just look at all the possibilities and cover them all so that we could adopt, one or more of them afterwards. Without
every time you change a regulation, you don't have to go through a whole EIS again.
Okay.
That's the whole point of the, right.
Thank you, John and Kathy and down board. The southern pine beetle came up as a big issue. It is, in their terms, wreaking havoc in many of the Wainscott locations. They would like to have or confirm with Scott Wilson and his department the correct disposal if it's necessary to have it. There are some confusing things education-wise out there. People are getting from the guys coming in to cut down the trees. No, you need to take them away. No, you don't need to take them away. Scoring doesn't help. So there's a lot of conflict that the homeowners are hearing, and would love to have either Scott Wilson come. Andy Drake and Andy Gates have been very helpful people who have called and asked for questions. I don't know. And they would like to see more information on our website, more educational information.
Like an FAQ, maybe?
Yeah.
I thought we had that on the website.
We may have it, sometimes it's hard
to look going.
Yeah. There was a couple of requests that could the town again take the debris for free. And we did discuss that, we've got so much debris there right now. That
we actually are not being allowed by the DEC to take pine beetle trees anymore.
So I did discuss that with them, that it may not be possible. And we talked about the Beach Lane beach parking, and we just got an email while we were in session from the chairman who, and again, I'm going to thank David Lease for giving that group some options.
Yeah.
So he had 4 different options for them to choose from, maybe 5, but I believe there were 4. And so their subcommittee looked at it and considered which one they liked the best. So you're going to get they selected number 2, and they also have a memo that maybe some additional things that could be considered as we go through that, reconfiguring that parking at Beach Lane. And very grateful. Thank you, David, for doing that.
My pleasure.
And the meeting in June is going to be planned for in person at the chapel. So depending on what happens with COVID, that is the plan right now. The working group for the Wainscott implementation plan also met this past Wednesday. They were looking at 3 issues at this meeting, which was the streetscape, which they've been looking at in different parts. This was to bury power lines, which they think may be doable. Zoning approach would be including incentives and grants for parking changes. Incentives and grants would be for enhancement of the community, maybe facades to be more regular and in keeping with the community. And also looking at parking and incentives, shared parking, which we talked about during the Hamlet Plan study, and perhaps a municipal lot that would be purchased by the town. They also talked about the role of housing in the business district. There was a wide range of everything from impacts to the school to restrictive housing for seniors only, or for other types of restrictive housing, which might not impact the school system so much. So, all the way to no housing. So it was a very wide-ranging group. The next meeting for the Wainscott Working Group is May the 17th, and it will be discussing kind of the aspects of the pit and how that is being considered within the Hamlet Plan, and how that would work.
So do they meet at night, Sylvia?
They do. They meet from 7 to 9. So, and the consultants really run the meeting. And Jeremy Samuelson's also been on the meetings, and so it's been very productive. I think they're going to come back after this and this is the last meeting coming up, and they'll have a summary for the town board to look at and do a presentation for the town board. The Arts Council also met yesterday, and I've given you all the written posters. It's the East Hampton High School Student Alumni Art Show that's being sponsored by the East Hampton Arts Council. Also helping with them are businesses within the town and village, which is Eagle Supplies, I guess. Paint supplies.
Golden Eagle, yeah.
Golden Eagle. Village Hardware, One Stop Market, and East Hampton Plumbing and Heating Supply have also been helpful. There will be 15 alumni artists that will be exhibited, and 25 student artists. This is being done in conjunction with the East Hampton Historical Society. So at 150, it'll be at Clinton Academy in their lower level. And at 151 Main Street, the artist reception is May 13th. It's coming Friday from 4 to 7. And the artwork will be on view and able to be purchased May 13th to the 22nd. So really excited about getting that art show off the ground, really talking just about and showing just local artists and kids that went, and adults now that went to East Hampton High School. So we also had an update on Brooks Parks, and they were very grateful for the Star article. And as some of you know, or maybe all of you may know by now, after May the 4th, the National Trust for Historic Preservation is including Brooks Parks Home and Studio on the 2022 list of America's 11 most dangerous historic places. And it was published on May the 4th. So just wanted to bring you up to date on that. And outdoor dining legislation, the planning department sent out a letter as a flyer to the restaurants with information and the application, and several have already come into the planning department. So just letting you know that's working.
I was wondering if, because when we were talking, I might have been in our enforcement meeting, that, some business owners may be confused because, it's great that we're getting the information out about the outdoor dining so that they know what the rules are, but also about the string lights, so that should also go out to the restaurants and places so that they know, because they could have string lights during COVID and now they can't. And Buzzy was saying that there's
I'm sure that there's going to be a little bit of confusion. So they have to come in if they're doing any outdoor lighting and that is not on their site plan.
So that was included in the letter that went out.
Yes. And it was included, and it's in the application. If so, you have to then you have to get an administrative lighting plan. Which is done again, you don't have to go through the planning board. You just have to get an administrative permit, and string lighting is not allowed. So.
Do you have that package, or should I reach out to planning. Just like to have it so that if, somebody calls us or it comes up during the special event process, it would be great.
I'll
have that.
Okay, I had thought, and that's on me, I thought Eric was going to send that out, but I may not have written it back to him. I know he sent it to me, and I said I'd like to have it to the town board. Yeah, that'd be
I don't
great.
think I've seen it either.
Okay.
I know we had a discussion about allowing for shielded string lighting. They have shielded
Yeah,
string
you still have
lighting.
to go through the administrative permit.
Yeah, let's see.
Let's
Yep.
see.
All right, who's passing?
If there is something that fits
It
our,
has to- It just has to
Yeah.
comply with
would have to comply.
with our lighting code.
And that's it. Yep, thank you.
Kate, you have a liaison
Yes, I
report for us?
do. I have a brief report. First of all, yesterday, the Waterfront Advisory Committee met. We had a really interesting meeting. That's a committee that is looking to update our LWRP plan, our local waterfront advisory plan. We had a guest speaker. It was Bruce Bates, who talked about our emergency preparedness plans. And Bruce asked me to remind folks that, hurricane season's coming up, or just to review their emergency preparedness plans in any case. And if you go to our website and put emergency preparedness in the search engine, you'll come up. We have a whole page. We have information in English and in Spanish, and it's a good time for folks to update their home plans. And there's some checklists, links to checklists, et cetera, on our page that will help you make your own plan and create a checklist to have your go bag, et cetera, to be ready for any emergency.
We should have Joanne put that on social media.
Yeah, it's a good time to start thinking that. Yep, it's coming up soon. So, and in any case, whether it be storm preparedness or anything, it's a good time to think about that. Bruce gave us so much information about the county plan, what the town has going on, and it's interesting how much is happening behind the scenes for emergency preparedness and post storm resiliency recovery. The plans that the town has in place. It's a wealth of information. He was very gracious with his time. And we are looking for grant opportunities to update the LWRP. There's, as David mentioned before, there's grants all over the place and money out there. And we are looking to use some get some grants to update our LWRP. It was adopted into the comprehensive plan, I think, in 2007-ish.
1999, actually.
1999 even, back further. So it is time to take it.
That's when it started being, it was
Well, that's when they started drafting. I don't think it was adopted until 2005.
Yeah, and it's the state also has money out there and for LWRP updates. So that's what we'll be looking into doing. That is also in connection with the Coastal Assessment and Resiliency Plan updates. We got some very good press on the plan itself. Some of the headlines, were dire futures, but the future is not dire if we plan for resiliency. So I think what the plan is, it's a place to start the conversation about resiliency and sustainability and updating some of our coastal codes, building codes, et cetera, to prepare for sea level rise and to have a resilient East Hampton and a sustainable community. CARP, I just want to remind everyone, it is not an environmental plan per se, we're like an open space plan. CARP is a plan to protect the community and the economic engines in the community and residential structures, our roadways and our critical infrastructure. So this is not a plan I call it, it's a community plan rather than strict what some folks would call an environmental plan. And also, I have an update on the South Fork Wind Farm. It'll sound repetitive to the members of the Wainscott CAC, but I just wanted to let the members of our community know that South Fork Wind has ended their work on trenching under town roads for this season and has demobilized from town roads, and they are in compliance with our road easement agreement with Suffolk Wind and also the state's EM and CP plan. Now, through the summer, trenching and construction work will take place on the Lwrp right-of-way and on the construction of the interconnection substation on Cove Hollow Road. In September, the work will come back again to our town roads where the final phases of construction will take place under our town roads. The addition of a couple, I think 4 vaults that have to be put in along the route, and then the horizontal directional drilling will take place to bring the cable in. That HDD work will begin approximately in October, and that will bring the cable onshore under the beach, and the splicing work will then begin, and that will lead eventually to the demobilization again from town roads and final restoration work, and that work will mandated to end by April 30th, 2023. Again, to date, no soil contamination has been found anywhere along the construction route. The only thing that's in there again is iron, and there was only one instance of dewatering needed, and that's by the transition bay joint or joint bay. I always get that backwards. And that's just off of the parking area of Beach Lane. And that was the only place where they encountered any water along the entire route. It's a small amount, so it was able to be live loaded right onto the trucks, run through carbon filter, tested, and then removed from the town. And that's my update. However, I do also want to let folks know that I will still attend the compliance meetings, both bi-weekly and the monthly compliance meeting that South Fork Wind is compelled to have by the permit. And that includes representatives from the state agencies, the LIRR, our town departments, and myself on those calls with compliance reports. So that those compliance meetings will be ongoing. Then I have some announcements from the Springs Historical Society and Community Library. They're hosting again an exhibition entitled Recognizing Women's Right to Vote in New York State from May 13th through June 12th. It's a wonderful exhibit. There'll be presentations by Arlene Hinkelmeyer of the League of Women Voters, who loaned the library a number of items highlighting local suffragists. I invite people to go out and take a look at that. And also the blacksmith shop will be open for the first time in years on May 28th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we'll be giving demonstrations on smithing for folks interested. And I think at the opening, we'll be receiving an invitation to attend the May 28th opening.
Forged in Fire, Springs Edition.
Yes, that's us. We'll be doing the reality show next. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Kate. So just to give folks an update on COVID numbers, 11.32% positivity rate from our local testing site here at 110 Stephen Hand's Path. That's, I think, fairly consistent with the numbers that we're seeing countywide. COVID's still here. Doesn't seem to be going away. People are still getting sick. The good news is that the number of people getting seriously ill from the disease that's a very small number. And the hospitalizations, last I spoke with Robert Ross from the hospital, it was 3 patients, 2 of which were on vents. I don't know if that number has changed since I spoke to him or not, but that's a far cry from the 35 or more folks that we saw, hospitalized in the past with similar infection rates. So I think, make sure you stay boosted and that you're vaccinated and, take precautions you can. And hopefully with the warming weather, this will die down in terms of this illness. We had a meeting of the Town Property Management Committee yesterday. We spoke for a while about Brooks Park, discussing various aspects of it. The group of folks that are interested in forming a 501c3 that could take over management operation if we were to restore it. We talked a while about the restoration, the need for, if the buildings are used for public assembly, that a fire road would have to be put in, which has to meet fire department, fire marshal specs. I believe it's 26 foot in width. And it would have to be a surface that's capable of supporting, the heavy equipment, fire trucks, if they were to respond. That is not a CPF eligible expense. That would have, those funds would have to come either from private fundraising or town, or a combination of the two. It's not an insignificant amount of money either.
But that's only for public assembly?
Yeah, so public assembly, basically if you're going to use it for the public.
Okay.
So that's, I don't think that there's necessarily a scaled down way that you could have that without having that road required.
And it has to be paved?
It has to be an improved surface capable of, potentially could be gravel.
Okay. What did we do for Duck Creek?
There's a paved surface that goes.
There's
paved parking
I
area
think,
there.
and part of it has to do with distance from the road as well. There's just a series of criteria.
Okay.
So if you want the specifics, you can contact Dave Brown,
Yeah, thanks.
Chief Fire Marshal, who's looked at the site several years ago.
I know we've talked about it in the past.
So that, that's an important factor. We're waiting for Drew Bennett to come back with some pricing plans and specs, so we can have an idea of what the cost might be. There was some discussion about Carl Fisher House, the Montauk Historical, who has a current license agreement with us for that property. Was looking into installing an ADA compliant bathroom facilities at the Fisher House. And they're looking at the more modern addition as the location for that, rather than disturb the more historic, older main part of the house for that. So we should probably be receiving something from them shortly about those plans, which we'll need to approve. Let's see. Boys and Girls Harbor was discussed as well, the pavilion there. After having demonstration to the committee as to the size out here on the lawn, it was determined that the 30 by 44 pavilion was the appropriate size. And so we're waiting on an updated bid proposal that would be provided by Polygon. They're on state contract for pavilions. We presented to the board proposed style, which was met with acceptance and support. So now it's just a matter of getting that price and having that cited moving forward on that. The park there at Boys and Girls Harbor is also a prime candidate for, and is planned to receive a pedestrian bicycle ADA compliant rec path through the park. Much of the topography is relatively flat and will accommodate that, much like what was done at recently at the Buckskill Preserve, that 25 acres there. So it'd be a great amenity to connect the pavilion with the open field and the surrounding woodland trails. It probably will cost a good bit less than Buckskill because there's not much clearing required, and there's already sub roads there that were on the property. So we'll look forward to having those plans presented at a future work session. Last night was the Immigrants Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. They went back to remote meetings due to the increase in COVID positivity, and folks were more comfortable meeting remotely. So that was a change back. It was nice to get that one meeting in person, but we're back to remote for the moment, as most members were more comfortable doing that. Have to say it's a little more convenient too than having all the vehicles being driving to one location to have the meeting in person. So I'm sure it's much less on the carbon footprint as well. There was discussion about the Amagansett Village Improvement Society's proposed memorial pollinator garden on Bluff Road. Board members may recall that there's an area on Bluff Road where there is some clearing, a clear view of the Atlantic and the Double Dunes, and some benches at that location. This plan includes the installation of pollinator garden, which I know is a very popular topic right now.
I saw that. I support that.
And yeah, that's been sent around so board members get a chance to look at that. And if you approve, we can have a resolution on to approve that work. It would be done by Charlie and Sons. Charlie Whitmore's company in Amagansett is offered to do that work, and is being made possible through the generous donation of a family who lost a young son, not too long ago. So that was met with, I think, unanimous support actually by the CAC. We also had a brief discussion of the LED street lighting project, which, as I understand, in talking with Kim Shaw, Director of Natural Resources, that map of all the existing locations is nearly complete. So that's the next step. There are 3 different types of lights that are installed down at the road end at Amagansett, at the Atlantic Beach Road end. And we've talked about putting together sort of a numbering system on those various lights and have a QR code so that people can weigh in as to which they think looks best.
Okay.
And do a sort of a somewhat informal survey. And the CAC members were also encouraged to go down and have a look. The latest update
That's happening right now?
Yes, the Barry from Buildings and Grounds has installed those lights, so they're there. And so developing that little QR survey still needs to be done. The ongoing effort by members of the CAC to petition for home delivery for mail for Amagansett was another stumbling block. Apparently, the postal officials who've reviewed the petition have initially denied that request, primarily due to lack of resources and expense. There is an appeal process which they've initiated. And that's pretty much it for the CAC. Yesterday, our wildflower seeds, our Northeast deer-resistant wildflower mix arrived for the meadow. So we'll be looking to have those planted all around Mariev and Fontaine. Okay. So they can be dancing. The Bill King sculptures that are out on the meadow there. So look for an area that's marked off and for that planting. And just want to remind everybody, May 17th is the school board and budget vote coming up for all the local school districts. So make sure whatever district you reside in that you participate in that and vote for your school board candidates and the budget.
Can I just add on to that one?
Sure.
So there's 2 school board members in Springs that are not running this year, and Amy Rivera and Dave Conlon. Amy Rivera, of course, works for the town here. I commend all of them. I commend all the school boards for working diligently through COVID right now and dealing with a lot of emotions. And that's all the school districts, and specifically in Springs, these 2 individuals kept budgets kept the budget tight, and they also went through a very large expansion And from my family's household to those two, I want to thank both of them for their time served.
Thanks,
I
Dave.
appreciate you mentioning that.
That's important that we have people in the community step up to serve. Those are positions that are very important, yet they don't receive any remuneration for it. You have to be really a person who is community minded and is seeking to improve the common good. And we do have a former school board member, Kathy Gonzalez, here on the town board. So that's it for my liaison report.
Peter, can I just jump in?
Sure.
I left one thing out and yeah, the school board vote, I just want to tell the folks in Springs that the vote is from May 17th from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. in the Springs School Library. I just wanted to give that location. And also I forgot to ask if the board members received an amended letter from the Energy Sustainability Committee on the turf fields. It was emailed around.
Remember seeing that.
Okay, so I'll make sure that that it's, I received it, so I'll make sure that you have.
Thanks.
And that's it.
So we have a few resolutions, Kathy.
We do, starting with Resolution 2022-634. It's provisional and contingent appointment to Office Assistant Spanish Speaking, Erica Chimbo. This is in the town clerk's office. Hourly salary would be $37,042.46 for a 35-hour work week.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
2022-635 is to waive escalation fees for fire alarms in the East Hampton Housing Authority units, and those apartment complexes are Acabonic Apartments, Avalon, Gansett Meadow, and Springs Fireplace Apartments.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
636 is to approve $400 for community engagement breakfast. We'd like to have coffee and bagels here when the community shows up on Saturday, May 21st from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. to weigh in on the new design of the senior center.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
2022-637 is to adopt local law, amend Chapter 167, litter and dump control. We had the public hearing on April 7th.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
I'd like to offer Resolution 2022-638. This is acceptance of donations for the Lwrp Simonson Skate Park. One is in the amount of $20,750 from John D. Britton II, and the other one is from Anonymous for the amount of $44,250.
Second.
All in favor?
Very generous.
Aye.
Aye. Yes.
Passed and carried. Thank you very much.
639 is the Duck Creek Farm Management Plan update authorizing resolution. We had, this public hearing was held on April 21st, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
640 is my favorite one of the year. We're accepting EH bid EH 22017 for portable toilets to Outback Portable Toilets, Inc.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
641 is the approved change order number 1 for the Lwrp Simonson Skate Park renovations and improvements, EH 21-042. This is for extra work in the amount of $65,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
And I have 2022-642. This is a list appointment from provisional principal office assistant for Danielle Peridin. And this is whereas the Suffolk County Department of Civil Services has given an examination for principal office assistant promotional, and therefore be it resolved that Danielle Peridin is hereby permanently appointed to the full-time position of principal office assistant in the planning department with no change in salary, schedule, or budget account, retroactive to March 11th, 2022. And there is a probationary period for this appointment for 26 weeks.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. Resolution 2022-643 is a bond for $290,000 for aquatic sand removal, Lake Montauk, and other sites.
Second.
Councilwoman Burke Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilman Lees.
Aye.
Councilwoman Overby.
Aye.
Councilwoman Rogers.
Aye.
Supervisor Van Scoyac.
Aye. Passed and carried. Resolution 644 is list appointment provisional principal office assistant Amanda Bennett, and that's retroactive March 11th with no change in salary, schedule, or budget account.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. 645 is to retain Savick Murray for airport engineering work for updating the runway and taxiway pavement markings to comply with FAA standards. And that's for a lump sum cost of $33,895.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pass carried. 646 is a budget modification, building department, and that is moving from computer software in the amount of $5,000 to overtime in the same amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. Do you have exec session today?
I make a motion, we go to exec session for CPF leases and advice of counsel. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Shall we reconvene at 5?
Sure.
Fine.
That work? Thanks very much, everyone. Stay safe and